Welcome to the Dynamic Company Culture Spotlight podcast. I am David Lindsay, co-founder, lead educator, and speaker at Phantom Leap Education. At Phantom Leap Education, we believe people have so much more inside of them than they realize. And through our services, we help them become the best versions of themselves possible. Beyond the individual, we also believe that company culture is such a large part in creating a business that not only survives, but will thrive through the tough times, as we have all been through the last few years. So over the next 20 to 30 minutes, we'll be shining the spotlight on businesses that have achieved this and how you may be able to incorporate some of their ideas and philosophies into your business. Stick around until the end and I'll reveal how you can become a guest on a future podcast. Now is the time to sit back, take down some notes and enjoy this episode of the Dynamic Company Culture Spotlight podcast. Welcome to today's episode. In this episode, we have the founder of Gothic PR, Courtney Lukitsch. She started this in 2002 and built it all the way from the ground up. Since Courtney, this is your baby, you know it inside and out. Why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and about Gotham PR?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for that energetic introduction. As you know, stateside, it's 4 a.m. So this is the golden hour when we get up and make the magic happen. So we are just celebrating our 20th anniversary. And in doing so, thank you. In doing so, we opened a new Miami office. So for 20 years, we've been in New York City, also in London. And during the pandemic, we expanded our operations into both Miami and Los Angeles. So it's been a real time of growth for us and a very exciting one.
That's brilliant, because starting your business in 2002, that makes me think about a saying, crisis creates opportunity. So 2002, that was around the time of September 11. So starting your business in New York City around the time of September 11 must have been crazy. So would you explain to us how you started Gotham PR and the growth, especially over the last 2 years?
It was 6 months on the heels of that experience in New York City, which of course was life-changing for everyone involved. Everyone can explicitly remember exactly where they were and what was happening, what the sky looked like. Everybody talks about the color of the sky being a very specific blue, and I remember that vividly. Yes, I had worked at numerous agencies in New York, all very high profile in technology and working with a lot of creative enterprise. And then I realized in doing so as a business development strategist that I could do it for myself, right? So fast forward those 6 months after 9/11, we basically earned our first really major clients, and that allowed us to fund the business. And, it was completely bootstrapped. We didn't have financing. It was purely, and again, it was a moment in New York, right, where you said crisis creates opportunity. And likewise, during the pandemic, I think because we work with a lot of essential industries, that meaning at the time, construction, designers, architects, planners, the demand was exponentially higher because everyone was building homes, investing in real estate. And so that explains a lot of the growth. And I think over the past 2 decades, people have learned obviously to invest in their business during a downtime, because then when they forecast or position themselves when you're coming out of a recessionary or strained economic moment, then your business is that much stronger, right? So
100%.
Again, we can't do it for everyone, but we're very selective in whom we choose to partner with. And I think everyone's seeing a lot of exciting reward, right, for all the tough times. So it's not to diminish the difficulties, right? But as crisis communication experts, we're the ones that people come to, right, when there's a legal case or when there's, a challenge in the business. So it's a lot more than just sort of publishing photos and stories, right, in the media.
Oh, for sure. And especially with the last 2 years where things have been rocky, and you mentioned about the exponential growth that you've had, how have you been able to keep both yourself and your team upbeat? Like, because with what's hit us the last years over in America, here in Australia, there were people walking around with their sorry sacks on their back shoulder. So what were you able to do to keep yourself and your team motivated and moving forward?
That's a great question. I mean, I see myself as being almost motivator in chief. I think in order to be a a solid leader, you have to take care of yourself and really try to employ healthy practices so that then you can convey those not only to your team, but to your clients, right? So
Yeah.
I'm sure you get this a lot where people say, oh, your energy is so positive and they're attracted to that, right? So
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that we don't leverage a healthy dose of critique or feedback, because we obviously have to deliver that side of the equation, right, too, on the business side. But I think being very solutions oriented and being positive about it, basically not taking no for an answer, and always finding ideally an optimal solution to problems is really where we're coming from. And also just being able to distill complexity into very simple elements. Particularly when you're working with junior team members, like they don't have the network and they don't have the sort of bulletproof armor that I think a more seasoned professional might possess. So it's also teaching them, how do you build that so that you're not, taking things sensitively or personally, right, in a business context. And fortunately, we have such great clients that the relationship is such that we can be really honest with each other. And so the exchange is never fraught with that much tension because there are already so many, as you say, external factors to deal with and mitigate that we don't want to add to them. We want to strip that away, right? Yeah. So I think that's a big 100%. Part of being dynamic, right? It's like peeling an onion so that you get to the good part, but you get rid of all the part that makes everybody cry or be upset.
Right. I was going to say, when you're peeling back the layers on that onion, occasionally there's tears, but you need that to get to the gold, really, get to the nugget of that onion. Yeah. And I love what you said about with especially your junior people, where they haven't built that armor yet, where that takes years and years. And what's a couple of steps that maybe other people might not have been able to think about, where you've been able to really help insulate that for the junior staff members, the abuse that they might get?
Creating a pathway or a runway for them, to use some marketing language, where they see beyond sort of their nose or what's right in front of them to what's going to be happening on a quarterly or even a biannual basis. Because I think when you're younger, the immediacy of everything is just at the forefront. And so you don't always cultivate that sense of perspective down the road. So I think our track record and longevity, again, if you look at the client roster, I mean, going back to the tears part, I can remember some tears before bedtime, as I like to say, use that expression, which I think is British, with some problematic client scenarios. And that's just part and parcel of doing business, right, for so long and through so many different economic cycles. And I think, too, as the practice leader, that I've learned to select a lot more carefully. It's not just about money and running a business, right? It's about, and again, this segues into the book that I just wrote, creating significance. So it's working with companies, brands, organizations, and leaders that really are in it for the duration to create something of lasting value, right? So significance is different than success. And I think what our value proposition is we do partner with our client. And I think a lot of PR firms, it's mostly about press, and then they're done, and then they move on to the next hot topic or, trendy, movement, what's ever going on in the news cycle. Whereas I think when you're helping to build a business and you're a partner, then ideally you have those clients for a longer period of time. That's not to say the clients don't go away and then come back sometimes 10 or 15 years later, because that's also happened. But again, those are businesses that we helped establish that I think have that significance, right? They're really contributing to the world. They're practicing zero waste policies. There's sort of a more circular economic viewpoint to what they're doing. So it's not this sort of flash, get in and get out of the market type scenario.
Yeah. So really practicing the delayed gratification as opposed to the instant win. So
we have that too, and everybody celebrates. When somebody gets into the Financial Times or New York Times or Wall Street Journal International, of course we all celebrate, right? Because it's a great thing, and that happens with great frequency too. But then the client invariably, as with any instant gratification, they say, okay, well, what's next? What do I get next? What are you going to give me tomorrow? So, right. Yeah. Which is, again, we love working with super ambitious people. As I said, we have clients in both Sydney and Melbourne. We're actually working on a television series called By Design TV. You may be familiar with it. They cover technology, innovation, and also architecture and design. So that's MCW Productions. If you look them up, you'll see that they're very, well respected, and they were smart enough to reach out to us. That's another point I wanted to make, is we don't solicit business. So everything has come to us by referral or word of mouth or just online research over, past couple of decades. So clearly, I think the client kind of knows what they're looking for before they engage with us, which obviously helps vet a lot of, problematic scenarios from occurring in the first place, right?
Oh, for sure. And them doing their research. And for me, what I've found as well is word of mouth is the best publicity that you can have. And like you said, with it all being inbound, that just says so much about you and the business that you've built up with Gotham PR. So congratulations with that. But and you mentioned the book. I really want to go a little bit deeper in that. Would you be able to explain the creating significance? Because you did mention the difference from significance to success. A lot of people won't really understand that. I understand the difference, but would you be able to talk about that book a bit?
Certainly, yes. And again, this goes to the value of coaching, which I think you do and I do on a regular basis. But I also worked with an actual book coach who helped me realize a lot of these structural elements, right? The narrative arc to explicating or explaining the difference between creating success and significance. So significance, I think, is values driven. It's mission driven. We hear a lot about, diversity, equity, and inclusion. We hear a lot about creating environments, obviously, for next generations. And I mean, I think the practitioners, particularly in larger international metropolises like New York, we've always had a very diverse practice from day one, right? So none of this is particularly new information, but I think what people might find interesting is that we have clients in 30 countries. I actually have clients on every single continent on the planet, which is
crazy.
Quite
Not
an
many
achievement.
other people would be able to say that. And for everyone listening as well, I just want to thank Courtney for coming. It's 4:15. It's 4:20 in the morning where she's at, and it's 6:20 where I'm at in Sydney, Australia. So that just shows the level of dedication that Courtney's got to her craft, that she does get up at unbelievable hours in the morning to deal with us here in Sydney, the people down in Melbourne. Just time zone doesn't really seem to matter. And hitting 30 countries, that's just insane. How do you manage all the different time zones?
It really is not that complex. I mean, you yourself are doing it. So I think this is just the world we're living in, right? I mean, with Zoom and all of these great tools, we'd be getting up early anyway to work, right? So, and you'd be probably working a little, closer to 7 p.m. your time. So you just do what you have to do to get it done so that you can go out and go surfing or do something fun like I plan to do later today.
And I love that as well, because I've been up since 3 o'clock in the morning. That's what I do every morning, and it's just a habit. And like you said, you have to do what you have to do. It's your business, and it lives and dies by you. And that's what we're here celebrating. We're celebrating people that are going above and beyond and creating that culture of just a great culture within their business. And that's why we've got you on here, because of the culture that you've built and established and the structure that you've given, especially the young people coming through, like you said, that haven't really built up that body of armor. And talking about the young people coming through, you've been in this business for, you said 20 years, which is enormous. Think back to when you were 15 years old. What's a few words of advice that you would give a 15-year-old Courtney?
No, I love that question. It's really kind of very visceral in response, because I think in school, granted, I think educators are a lot more progressive today, but they would sort of give us these framing exercises like, what will you be doing when you're, say, 20 years old or what have you. So I was always very ambitious. I think, I had sort of programmed out that I would be a consultant. I remember saying that to an executive when I was in my early 20s, and they kind of chuckled like, oh, that's so cute. But really,
cute little Courtney.
Yeah, but those kind of remarks, obviously it stayed with me, and it made me more determined to actually prove myself in that regard. And also to kind of inculcate that in the people around me, largely women. So most of the people that I've trained on the junior level, who again, are sometimes, I used to work with people starting at 18. Now, because of legal requirements, we work with people who are 21 and over because of events and things like that. And just, working late at night sometimes. And So the fact of the matter being that you become that resource, right, that you are seeking out. And my mantra has been for the past few years, surround yourself with experts, right? So I think my 15-year-old self would say, wow, you're an expert at this point. And so you'll like this story. Here's a fun little anecdote. A client came to me recently. I was just in New York a few days ago. He is of Czech origin and is also expanding into Miami. And he said, you know what? I found your name written down on a margin on a piece of paper. I don't know who gave it to me, and I don't know what the conversation was, but I knew that I should just call you and have a conversation with you. And, you know, we spent 3.5 hours with he and his partner talking about his expanding business here in Miami. And I just thought, wow, that's pretty organic, right? That's about as authentic as you're going to get. Yeah.
I love that. And there's Courtney, who's the founder of Gotham. There's also Courtney away from business. And we all need that downtime because, as you said, you're up at 4 o'clock in the morning getting stuff done. What do you do to recharge your batteries? What does Courtney away from Gotham PR do?
Well, primarily I try to stay really healthy. I think I mentioned that to you. I have some immune compromised people in my family, and unfortunately, we're still experiencing some, viral rates both in New York and in Miami. So I just try to really meditate and be outside and soak up the sun and stay as positive and well as possible. And truthfully, and I don't want to jinx myself, but I have not fallen ill at all. So I think there's something to that, right? You have to know, to your point, you said you've been up since 3, and I find that when you're really a dynamo, as you clearly are, that sometimes you pile on more work. So I have to remind myself, like literally unplug, power down, and just put the device away, because it's you get so stimulated throughout the day that you have to find a way to come down from that and level out so that you can recharge for what comes next. So you can't create out of a vacuum, right? So I try to do things that stimulate my creativity and problem solving and things like that.
Yeah, because like with a lot of the people that I work with as well, they're in the creative space as you are. And it's funny when their downtime, it might be something, because I'm a fighter as well. So I deal with obviously a lot of fighting, a lot of sparring, rock climbers, surfers, and they go, it's crazy because you're just in the moment at that point. And so your subconscious is still working away. And then after it's happened, that's when you get the aha moment.
Yes. That happened the other day. And I agree with that. And it's really a part of the flow state. As I mentioned, I work with a lot of visionaries, and they will often mention, always have that little notepad or something that you can write the idea so it doesn't disappear entirely when you have that epiphany, because you are surfing or, in the shower or taking a walk on your bicycle, what have you. And so, it's really important to capture the essence of that. And to your point, I had that experience the other day where something I had talked about, I had a long, lengthy discussion with the client, and then it all just sort of synergized in one moment. It crystallized into this, okay, this will be the campaign kind of thing. So that really does exist. It's not a myth.
Yeah. And it's moments like that where it's almost like everything aligns perfectly. And it's just like you see yourself running in slow motion, doing those high fives, and that's what it's really all about. It's, I guess, like the game of golf. I'm not sure if you play golf, but all it takes is that one shot where you hit it sweetly. And you can play terrible the rest of the time, but that one good shot is what just brings you back day after day.
Yeah, absolutely. Tennis is very much that way. I've been playing a lot of that in Miami. And also, to your point, I studied martial arts, and I think that has been very instrumental in, it's almost like, when you watch The Matrix, like how you avoid conflict, because you work around it. You do the classical workaround as opposed to sometimes full on engaging. So I think there's a lot to that, mastering that. And to your point, keeping your energy level very high. Yeah.
And also, because I vibe with that a lot, because I love playing sports. That's my background, and martial arts, fighting, and just the discipline that it has. Where running your business, you need to have that discipline, but then you also need to know and listen to your body. Like you said, your family's got some immune compromised parts of it. So you just have to really listen to your body and know when to step back, and also conversely, when there's a gap and when to really attack that.
Yes. And I love that you identified that, because more recently, to your earlier point, everything is coalescing because we have planned so meticulously. And that's not to say that change doesn't occur, but I'm seeing it client side, I'm seeing it personally, and I'm seeing it with my friends that because we have been in such close communication, all these elements are coming together kind of seamlessly. And I do think there's also a time in the economy, right? Like the third quarter, all of a sudden, people have their finances in order. We're seeing what the larger economic scenario looks like for the coming 6 months. And so people are being, to your point, highly proactive and saying, hey, you know what, I'm going to go for this because when the year turns over, I'm going to be in a very different position. And all it takes is 6 months, right, to harness that kind of intensity and work it to your advantage. But as I like to say to clients, when I was in New York last week, we loaded up all these initiatives and I said, it's going to be more work, right? Like I walk in and people see like work on my forehead, because I'm a taskmaster and we hold each other accountable. And so people always say, oh, is 6 months enough? I said, you would be surprised what can happen in 6 months. So yes, the answer is yes.
Yeah. Like a lot of people say, people overestimate what they can do in 1 month, but severely underestimate what you can do in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. And one thing that you mentioned a few times as well that I love as well is you surround yourself with people, like you told your 15-year-old self, surround yourself with experts. You tell yourself now, you surround yourself with experts. So how do you find those experts to work with?
Well, I think they're a lot more accessible today than they were when I was starting my business. I'll tell you that much. So I mean, I have a whole list. And yes, a lot has changed in a very good way. I have a whole list actually. It comprises a chapter in the book on everyone from having a great branding designer for UX and website to obviously lawyers and accountants. And as I referenced, a book coach who is also extremely strategic. So, goes way beyond just the writing principle and on. But to your point as well, that physical wellness aspect is important, like everything from PT to just having a really good physician. You'd be really surprised, or maybe you wouldn't. I talk to friends daily who don't have a good dentist or they don't have a good general practitioner. I mean, just very basic things that you would think, particularly in light of what we just experienced the past 2 years. Like I have my go-tos, it's a whole network. And I know that the minute I ask that one person, they will facilitate whatever needs to be done. So that takes it out of my whole worry realm, as a very detailed oriented person. Having an expert around you obviously is going to help you solve problems that much faster, right? I mean, it's not without obviously merits a budget, but that's part and parcel of doing business, right? So
100%. And what you mentioned as well is having a physician, having a doctor, having a dentist, because we get one body. We get, okay, you can replace your teeth, but people aren't aware that the teeth side of stuff, that's where a lot of the infections get in. So, and that's something that many people overlook, that they might have this little boil or this bump and they just keep grinding through it. Whereas and then 2 or 3 weeks later on, they're on their back. We can't perform our job when we're on our back. So being in the best physical health leads to the best mental health, which leads to the best productivity.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, going back to, not to get too granular on this, but people who have intense personalities like mine, we grind our teeth, and then that leads to other, as you say, it literally travels down your back. So, I mean, unless people understand physiology, it's all connected, right? So once you start studying sports and sports medicine, you see that performance correlates to output. So learning that early on, obviously most athletes already know that, but a lot of other people who are very driven, they keep working themselves until they're kind of burnt out. And that's never happened to me, fortunately, but that's only because, again, I got smart and surrounded myself with some really good people who help me pace myself, right? So it's easy to be sort of a runaway train. And I think that that's another thing I try to impart to my staff and also my clients. It's a team. So when we talk about doing things in 6 months increments, that involves many people, right? It's not just me and a CEO. It involves literally sort of harnessing the power of a whole machine of an organization and sort of turning it around in real time to get them. Change management would be the marketing term for it. Harness that power, right, in a new way. Because I think people get stuck working the same way and they expect a different outcome. And so then going in with a fresh perspective, allows people to see things in a new way, ideally, right?
100%. And everything I do, it comes back to sports. So like you were mentioning, you have that team around you. And with all sports, whether it's basketball, whether it's gridiron, or whether it's rugby league here in Australia, every different position has their own unique skill set,
Right.
has their own objective. And like you said, it's not just you and the CEO that are running Gotham. It's the entire team has to be going on that direction. And one thing that you mentioned, well, you've mentioned it a couple of times, is coaching, where
Yes.
I think it's funny how many people go, oh, I'll be able to get through without a coach. So can you tell us a little bit about that, how you both do coaching and how you receive coaching as well?
Well, a lot of it is the asking of questions, pertinent questions, listening, synthesizing, again, that complexity of emotions or activities, experiences, what's happening at that moment, client side, and trying to find a path forward. I mean, I'm very fortunate because my constituency can be anything from, say, early 20s to late 80s. So it's a very broad spectrum of clients, right? And what I'm seeing is like younger clients coming to us because they realize that we have the experience and the ability to coach. So I think that era where everybody wanted to work with sort of a 25-year-old has been proven to necessarily have some holes in it, right? From a leadership perspective. So definitely coming to a seasoned pro has its advantages. And I'm not sure if I'm answering your question.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm following with you. I'm following that completely, where you guys are like, coaching them. It's not just lead because it's people have read something in a book. You've actually lived it and you've been there, you've done that, and you can coach them in the right direction. And also, where did you find your coaches? Because you mentioned that you had a book writing coach, and no doubt you've had other coaches and mentors along the way. Where did you find those people?
What's interesting, well, from a mentor perspective, I maybe had one or two, but I always like to say I like to be the mentor that I didn't necessarily have, right? So I'm always sort of working on myself to optimize that coaching skill set. And obviously I still always have a lot to learn, but the pandemic definitely provided the ability to upskill, take extra courses, participate in all different kinds of new, learning more about the blockchain and all the, Web3 and the metaverse and all these things that are happening. I have a technology background. So that I thought was actually a pretty fruitful use of time. But coaching, I meet through various channels. You'd be surprised, again, people do their research, they approach me. So, I try to vet very carefully, but going back to your earlier question, helping clients oftentimes work through complex legal situations, contractual situations, even personal situations, hiring situations. I mean, I think everybody's desperate for talent and there's so many people on the market looking for jobs, and yet finding that right fit is really key because people don't want to expand and then contract, the rate of attrition. They're winning a lot of new work and business, and yet they want to hire the right people. So that really is kind of like an art form in and of itself that, again, I think it even eclipses the HR function in most companies. So it's like how do you find the right person to work with you? Somebody with such a high temperament and expectations and so forth, and sort of cultivating these and encouraging other people inside the organization to step up, right, into leadership.
100%.
And you'd be surprised how many conversations I have where I say, could you ask this person to become the studio director? Or could you ask this person to be the project manager or what have you? And they say, oh, that person doesn't want to take on that role. Well, I'm not sure that person's going to have a role in the future if they're not willing to. Yeah. Because then it places everything on the top leader, and that top leader obviously continues to grow the business, but is one person. So you necessarily have to encourage people to step into those roles. And the only way to do that is to start treating them as if they're already in them. So
100%. I couldn't agree more. And I love that about building from the inside, because they already know the culture that you've established at Gotham PR. So they're growing within that. And then when the other staff see the possibility of moving up, they get excited and they want to impress so that they can take that step up. And I love seeing that with companies that I've spoken for as well, seeing the internal growth, the possibilities there. And you mentioned the last 2 years have been an exponential time for Gotham PR. Where do you see yourself and the business heading in the next 3 to 5 years? I know it's mind-boggling what's happened the last 5 years, but try and project forward 5 years. Where would you like to see yourself?
Listen, I'm a planner and a forecaster, so this is not an alien question to me. Well, first of all, with the book coming out, I would say that, I'll take it on tour. I teach in university courses, entrepreneurial business, kind of startup culture. So I see doing a little bit of a masterclass, maybe something online to make it a little more accessible, in addition to, traveling to key markets. But I find that very fruitful. And then oftentimes either, seniors or graduate students will come to me and say, hey, I want to work for you. So it's also kind of a fun, passive recruitment channel, if you will. And so, yes, I think that, as I said, opening these new offices, we have a pipeline of projects already through 2023, probably leading into 2024. And then by 25, I've had multiple offers to either, acquire the company or, to form some new entity. I mean, I don't know the answer to that, I'll be honest. Yeah. And I think that's being authentic as well. But
and it's also exciting at the same time as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've had, we're only experiencing growth. And so I don't really want to put a clock on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. And I could just keep going, but time is getting away from us quickly. So just as we wrap this up, who would be your ideal client and how can they get in contact with you?
Oh, well, thank you for asking. First of all, LinkedIn, I think, has always been my favorite channels. People can do their research and see with whom I'm affiliated. So you can look at Courtney M. Lukitsch or Gotham PR and find easily a way to contact us. And that has been happening a lot. I get a lot of, direct messages and so forth, inquiries for new startups. So yes, I would say that that's probably the best way to find us.
Beautiful. And with your book, is it available on Amazon? Whereabouts can people find your book, Creating
it will be
Significance?
available on all those channels. I will post it on my LinkedIn. You can also look at gothampr.com. We'll probably structure a page for that. And yes, it will be available. I would say late fall at this point, just because we keep editing. So
yeah, this is the fun part of getting books out there, isn't it? The part that people aren't aware that goes on behind the scenes.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much. It's been such a great conversation.
No, my pleasure. And thank you very much, Courtney, for joining me. And people, just get out there, find Courtney on LinkedIn and check out Gotham PR.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to the Dynamic Company Culture Spotlight podcast. If you're a successful Chief Operations Officer, Human Resource Manager, or someone that runs a successful business that also has a great company culture, and you believe that you have a story to share with the wider community and would like to be a guest on a future podcast, please visit the link below. Or if you can think of anyone who you know would be a brilliant guest on this podcast, tag them in. And as always, feel free to share this far and wide. The further we can get this podcast, the more impact we can have. So don't forget to share this on all social media platforms and help others along the way. Don't forget to tag the DCCS podcast, as I love seeing your posts and guest suggestions. As we post regularly, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss episodes that will possibly help your business ramp up to a whole nother level. Your ratings and reviews go a long way to helping us get recognized and to promote the show, and they mean a lot to my team and I. If you want to know more, go to our website, www.phenomleap.com.au, or follow me on LinkedIn and feel free to message me there. Thank you very much for listening, and we look forward to giving you more tips on next week's episode.